Welcome. It is the Bring Your Worst show. My name is Damon Brown. I'm the host, executive producer, and all those many hats that I wear. If you're a fellow solopreneur, side hustler, if you're a fellow grinder on the side, I don't mean the app, but I mean as far as doing things on your own, you understand you're wearing multiple hats. I am bald, but I do wear many, many hats. Welcome. This is your place. The Bring Your Worst show comes to you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 1:11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time. Note the new time. The show's been around for 300 episodes. 300th episode, I think, was 2 weeks ago. I think with this episode 306, 307, something like that. Any of y'all keeping score? That's what's happening. And it's been just over 2 years. So it started December 22nd, the equinox, winter equinox of 2020. Oh my gosh, 2020. So thank you for riding with me. It's usually at a different time, but I shifted it to 1:11 p.m. because based on the feedback I've gotten and all the new people that are in the audience, thank you for all the love. 1 o'clock my time over here in Las Vegas seems to work better for y'all. So I want to make sure that I was serving y'all as best as possible. And it works out pretty well too, and I was, hey, thank you, Camilo. Thank you for the love. Vegas, that's right. Been here for a few years. It is my home now, as well as the home of my family. I have a young family as well as a wife, and it's been quite an adventure. I'll get into that as we talk more about the subject today. The new book, Career Remix, Get the Gig You Want, based on the skills you've got. If you're a writer of any salt, you got a ton of books. So I'm moving my books, got my kids' books over here. Career Remix, Get the Gig You Want, based on skills you've got. If you've been watching for a while, I worked really hard on the audiobook of this, so please go and rock with it. They had me in downtown Las Vegas doing it in the same booth as maybe not Pac and Biggie, but there's some big stars in there. And it was wonderful to do that energy. As some of y'all know, I have my own publishing imprint, also called Bring Your Worth. And so I'm used to doing this on my own. Again, if you're an independent creator, if you're a side hustler, if you're used to bootstrapping, as I did with my 2 startups, the second one I sold, then you're used to doing things on your own. The last book, again, Career Remix, I partnered with Barnes & Noble. That Barnes & Noble, the folks that own all the different bookstores around the world, mostly in the US, I believe, but all around the world. I ended up partnering with them for this one, and they gave me a lot of love. So shout out to them. And I hope y'all enjoy the book. If you're over on Amazon Live, you'll go and see the links to all the stuff I'm talking about on here. If you're watching on the YouTube channel over at youtube.com/BrownDamon, or on LinkedIn or the various places, then you'll see the links right down below. All right, let's get to the point. Today we're talking about improving inner peace. Yeah, it sounds tough. I'll give a quick example. I have a free newsletter at joindamon.me. You can get it there at joindamon.me. It comes every Wednesday at 5:55 a.m. And I send a message out saying, hey, I'm having a live Q&A. I usually have a live show on Wednesdays. So I have Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 1:11 p.m. Wednesday shows are usually live like this. And I was like, hey, listen, it's been a stressful handful of years. And I talked about the 3 Ps I was dealing with. I was being productive. I've done 8 books in the past 6-7 years. I talked about being a parent. And so I have 2 kids. Eldest one is 9. Youngest one is 6. And so guiding them, and I'm the primary caregiver. And the last one is obviously the other P, the pandemic. And I got a few messages back from my longtime readers. I've been doing a newsletter for several years now, probably about 10-15 years, every Wednesday. And they were like, hey, are you good? Are you okay? Because you're talking about stress and you're talking about how hard it's been over the last few years. And that's one of the difficult things that I've found with mental health. And you can give it a shout in the comments or, throw an amen in there or whatever, if you hear what I'm saying, where part of the challenge is just talking about it. I remember I had many, many years ago, I decided to get some therapy. And I was just going through a lot of life changes, a lot of heavy stuff. And I told a relative about it. I was like, hey, I'm going to go and check out this guy. He seems like he's cool, or it might have been after the fact, after I had the first session. And they were like, well, what's wrong? And I was like, well, this is going on. That was going on. I won't bother you with the minutia. And they're like, but are you okay? Like, why are you going to see somebody? And so what we often get confused with, particularly with people of color, let's be specific, particularly with Black people. I am African American. Um, but then also I have other relatives in my family who are other people of color. And us talking about it usually doesn't happen until it's way the hell too late, where it's like I'm on the verge of suicide or some extreme situation. I'm about to have a nervous breakdown. I'm about to do this to someone else or to myself. There's a long history behind that. I've written articles about it. I've talked about it in some of my books. So if you're familiar with my work, you know what I'm trying to say. The thing is that we have to learn to be ahead of the curve, right? So we have to learn to be ahead of the curve. And exactly, how do we normalize self-care? That's exactly my point. Thank you. How do we normalize self-care? And you see a lot of people that are chiming in are people of color. And so that is something that's a really big discussion in our community. Like, even if you see we call it the thumbnail, and I can't show it because even though I've had the show for 2 years, I'm still learning technology. But if you see the thumbnail for this before you clicked on it, it was a young African American woman. That was on purpose because we often do not have those kind of discussions within our communities, particularly African American communities. African American, I'm an African American. That's community I know the most. And so that's why I'm speaking on that. You might find that in your community. It could be the Irish community, it could be the Ethiopian community, but you might be able to resonate with some of the stuff I'm talking about. With my generation and younger, and I'm approaching middle age, if not middle age, depending on how you count it, we're more willing, I think, to talk about those types of things. And part of that is because of emotional intelligence being defined. Shout out to Daniel Goleman and Brene Brown. You'll find a lot of that stuff again on my main YouTube channel at youtube.com/Brown Damon. A lot of discussions with them. And now it's become, as was said, normalized to talk about those things. But we're one of the first generations to do that. And so emotional intelligence is actually a term that my 6 and 9-year-old kids know because they've seen me use it. They've seen mommy use it, my wife use it. Like they've seen that context. And so I want to kind of help us push that along. And so today I wanted to address or give a few tools that help me along and are still helping me to this day. Some of them are books, some of them are tools, some of them are apps that will kind of help, whatever you might be having a challenge with. Or if you know people that are having a challenge, you can share this with them. And most importantly, if you have any questions or any particular things that you're struggling with, or anything that you want to address, or even comments, throw them in the chat. I have a couple questions that I'm going to put in there that I'm going to answer based on the feedback that I've gotten for y'all. So there's already some questions in there. But if you have more questions and more insights, feel free to jump in. I'm actually going to be on for about a half an hour. So let's hop into. Why don't we hop into the first question? Because that kind of connects to the stuff we're talking about. One of the questions that I've heard the most is, how do I make time for self-care? And I've talked to my best friend about this. I've talked to other people about this. I might even said this on a couple of recent podcasts, that most of them are available again at youtube.com/Brown Damon. One of the challenges is that we need to kind of remove the self part out of care, because it's just care. When when my kid has a boo-boo, I'm not like, oh, okay, I have to do kid care. It's like, no, it's just care. I care. If my wife's having a hard time and I'm make sure she's good, that's not like wife care, right? Partner care. It's just care. It's like, I care about this person or this thing, where the case may be, and I'm going to go take care of it. And I've stopped saying self-care. I said it because it was a question, but I've stopped saying self-care and I just said care. Like, I've been doing the regular walks, and that's been fantastic as far as my own particular care, and with that in mind, it's like, all right, I have more stamina, more perspective, and it's helping my own mental care. When it comes to making time for self-care, if we want to use a self-care term, one of the best terms I heard recently was from Maddie Wilson. Shout out to Maddie. Hope you're doing well. and he's an actor and a creator. And they talked about something being the smallest unit of joy, the smallest unit of joy. I'll go ahead and throw a little bit more information about it in there. But it's about making the smallest unit of joy. The smallest unit of joy is essentially you saying, this small act will give me the biggest return. If you look at it from an investment, this will give me the biggest return on investment. There you go. So you can click that link right there. Or if you're watching a rerun, or if you want to continue to listen to what I'm saying, you can click it later. But the link is right there. The link is also in the description below. If you focus on the smallest unit of joy, then you can find those little morsels. So I didn't get a chance to do it today because I had some other appointments. Sometimes adulting gets in the way. But most days over the past month in February, we live in Las Vegas, and if you're familiar with Vegas, particularly if you live here, it's like lots of mountains here, and it's lots of territory. It's very mountainous. I didn't know that much until I moved here, because I'd always been on the Strip, right? As most people do. But right outside the Strip, it's like huge mountains. There's actually snow. You can see snow-covered mountains from my window. I'll just go on the equivalent of a nature walk, and I'm not Davy Crockett or anything. It's not that intense. I just take a walk, and being in the fresh air, seeing nature. I'm a big animal lover, so people are walking their dogs or whatever the case may be. Being connected to that gets me centered, and I'm like, okay, I'm ready to handle the day. Yeah, primary caregiver, got 2 little kids, married, make sure my wife is good. I'm running at least 3 businesses, right? And then I'm actually consulting and writing for other organizations. So it's just like, where do I find time for me? Well, you have to make the time. And sometimes it ends up being that smallest unit of joy. What's fascinating about this is that my kids, and they're always a good barometer if you happen to have kids, but if you don't have kids, then at least you can understand the concept where things start really restrictive. So maybe you have a health issue and there's only so much energy as you have. But as you work on that issue, and I've had health issues, so if you work on that issue, then suddenly that space that you have starts to expand. Same thing with kids. They came out the womb, and then it was my wife and I's responsibility. And again, for most of those years, that responsibility laid squarely on me. The buck stopped with me, right? As Eisenhower used to say, right? The buck stopped with me. And so as they get older, my eldest is about to start middle school in a minute. And suddenly that space is expanding. And if you follow the track, I know some of y'all personally on here, you understand, if you follow the track of my career, it's based on where my kids happen to be. It's based on where my health happened to be. And so me even building this YouTube channel over at youtube.com/Brown Damon, that wouldn't have occurred again when my kids were just out of the womb. And so you find those smallest units of joy because you have to. And then as you get more space, then suddenly you're in a space where you can have more joy. You can have at least more space, and those units get bigger. So by the time my kids are like in high school oh my gosh, it's only like 5 years from now, 6 years from now, when my kids are in high school, then instead of me doing a nature walk, maybe I'm going on a trip. Maybe I'm spending the day downtown in Vegas, and I'm working in there, and I'm in the environment. Maybe I'm having coffee with one of y'all when you come through. That space expands. So one of the best ways you can create self-care or care is based on whatever you have available. So try to reverse engineer it. Not to say, because I love traveling, not to say I love to be, Mardi Gras was yesterday. Shout out to all my New Orleaners. But I would love to have been in Mardi Gras yesterday, eating king cake, and bring my family too, and just party in, because I used to live in New Orleans. My roots are actually in New Orleans way back. But that unit of joy wasn't possible because of all the stuff that we have right now. 5, 6 years from now, maybe I get my kids out of school and then we head down to NOLA for a week. Who knows? But that expands based on what you have. So instead of worrying about what you don't have, focus on the things that you can do with what you got. That's why I love Maddie's theory here as far as the smallest unit of joy. Again, I love it, Maddie. Be sure and check out the short. It's a really short video, literally 30 seconds. Be sure and check it out later. As far as stuff that you can actually tangibly read, and I'm a big reader. I have a lot of big readers that are part of my coaching practice. All of us seem to be big readers. An excellent book is called No Mud, No Lotus. You can see there's food and rips on this copy, which is always a good sign. The more jacked up your books are, usually the more they've been handled. This has gotten a lot of love. It's by Thich Nhat Hanh. He's actually a Buddhist monk. He passed away. Man, time is flying. I want to say about a year ago. Yeah, he passed away about a year ago. Martin Luther King actually went to him to say, "Hey, I'm trying to get some peaceful resolutions happening and peaceful change happening down in the South, in Selma and beyond. And how do I do this?" So he mentored Martin Luther King. That's how OG this guy was. Fantastic book. I talk about it quite a bit in Career Remix, and particularly in my previous book, which you can see over here, Build From Now, How to Know Your Power, See Your Abundance, and Nourish the World, which came out a couple years ago. There's quite a few passages from him in that. It's fantastic for grounding, and you do not need to be a Buddhist. You don't even need to be spiritual. It's just that basic idea of, really quickly, the concept is that the lotus flower, which is those beautiful flowers that you see, they're usually pink and these fluorescent colors that you see, I believe it's Vietnamese, that you see in Vietnam and other places, they actually grow from the mud. So some of the most beautiful plants, flowers, I would say in the world, they come from mud. In other words, those tough times, that grit, those difficulties, they actually can be where those strengths and that beauty comes from. Right? To go back to parenting, parenting is by far the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life. I've done some tough stuff, like from the startups to to surviving near-death experiences, all kinds of stuff. Parenting is hard. Being married would probably be right after that. I think some of y'all might agree, right? But all of that growth, all that strength, all that insight that came from that, that's priceless, right? At least I believe that. So hopefully the things that you've gone through, you recognize the growth and the power that has come from that. Thich Nhat Hanh's best quote for right now. This episode was done when he passed away. I want to say it was about a year and a half ago. And it's a fantastic quote, actually, from No Mud, No Lotus. It'll be a great follow-up to this conversation that we're having here, particularly if you're curious about his work. I talk about that quite a bit. I think the episode is relatively short, probably about 7-8 minutes. So I believe it's worth your time. All right, let's get another question going. So how do I make space? Look under my glasses. You can tell I'm getting older. How do I make space for my side hustle in my busy life? I get this a lot. One of the biggest challenges that I found when I did, particularly my first startup, was it's at the exact same time that my wife went back to work, and I was at home with a 4-month-old and didn't know the end from the front. I didn't know what I was doing. Most parents don't, right? That's kind of how it works. That's what makes it so hard. You have to learn very quickly. And so it was me growing a startup while rearing our son. And the 2 startups I did, So Quotable, which led to my first TED Talk. Again, all my TED Talks are available at youtube.com/BrownDamon. Be sure and subscribe. That TED Talk, my second TED Talk, and my second startup called Cuddler, which I'm most known for, which connected people for hugs. We ended up getting 250,000 users and ended up selling about a year later, which is around my first son's 2nd birthday. And how do you make space for all of that? I think the first thing is to figure out what your priority is. And that requires a level of honesty, brutal honesty, I would say. For some people, they say, I want my career to be at a certain place. It could be for ego reasons. Nothing wrong with ego. I got plenty of ego, so no judgment from me. So it could be for ego reasons. It could be because my family hasn't been known for anything. and I want to work for my last name so people will know the Brown last name, right? That could be, in my case, it's Brown. Like it could be that. It could be I want to create security for my family, so I'm going to work my behind off so that they don't have to worry about a dime. Okay. It could be I want to be present for my family every single day because I know this time with them is limited. And particularly when it comes to kids, at a certain point, they're not going to want to rock with me anyway. So I might as well spend this time with them. Do you see the difference in those four priorities? Work backwards from that, right? For me, I was like, I want to make sure that I'm available for my kid, and then later on my kids, because we had a second one when the first one turned two, and so working with that, it's like, okay, I want to be for them with them every single day, and spend as much time as possible so that they know that I am there and I always got their back. I could be on the cover of the Wall Street Journal. I could have the number one book on the bestsellers list. It doesn't matter. And those things happen, which was crazy. It's like, all right, Damon, if you're really about that life, let's see how much of a priority it was. And there was one moment where I was on the phone with the Wall Street Journal and I was changing a dirty diaper and there might have been some vomit involved. But those are those moments where it's like, what the hell is your priority? Figure that out first. Then you can figure that part out. Because if your life is too busy for a side hustle, then that means likely you have other priorities that are above that. For me, when I did So Quotable and later Cuddler, I would wake up at 3:15 a.m. and work until 6 a.m. And for Cuddler, my co-founders were actually overseas. And so my 4 a.m. was they were in the UK. My 4 a.m. was their noon. It was their lunchtime, right? It's about 8 hours because I was over there on the West Coast, over here on the West Coast. And so I was able to build something based around that. Then from 6 a.m., which is when my eldest would wake up, to 6 p.m., it was all his time. And at 6 p.m., mommy would come back home. We'd have dinner together, get him to sleep, spend a little bit of time together, and the cycle would begin. And I did that for 2.5 years, something like that. Let's just say 2 years. My priorities were defined over spending time with my son. That was my priority. Everything else had to be built around that. And there's a fantastic analogy. Let me go ahead and throw the episode in the comments that talks about this. And it has to do with rocks. And some of you are probably familiar with the analogy. So I'm not gonna belabor it here, but be sure and check it out. It is fantastic. It is from Stephen Covey, who you might know from Classic. He's a generation or two ahead of me. I think he passed away a few years ago, but his son, who has the same name, has taken over the legacy in the publishing. But it's the Habits of Successful People, and all big series right there. He's a big deal back in the 80s and going to the 90s when I was coming up and hearing a lot about him from my parents and other people that I look up to. He has a fantastic analogy. I talk about it here. Another super short video. But I think it's a matter of, it might be difficult for you to make space because you have other things that are taking priority. And that's okay. Again, I couldn't launch a show like this or do the three times a week commitment. I couldn't do this, say, 4 or 5 years ago. So I was busy writing the books. Again, I've done 8 books in the past 6 years. So I was busy writing the books. I was busy doing this. Exactly. Make room for your big rocks first. And it breaks it down. Again, be sure and check out the video and you'll learn more about that. And so figure out the timing of your life and if it fits. And I think that's where some of our frustration comes from, as far as saying, I'm too busy to do my side hustle. In reality, you're actually not too busy. You just have other priorities. If you're willing to literally drop everything, you'd find time for that side hustle. But it doesn't make any sense with your priorities, because you're like, hey, I need to make sure I get this daily paycheck to make sure there's a roof over my head and my family's head. So I can't be doing all-nighters because I'm not going to be good on my job and my boss is already on me. That's a priority. That's okay. Again, this has to do with self-awareness. And so if you're aware enough to know that that's the priority, then rock with that. Just understand that there's going to be a certain amount of leeway that you're going to have to give to your life, right? And if you don't have that flexibility, then you might look at it in a black and white way. And it's like, it's not black and white. It's not black and white. Speaking of things that are black and white, in fact, I should have brought it up at the beginning. Um, how do I get mental health support? This is so important, particularly for people, again, in the more minority communities, such as myself, people of color, people in the LGBTQ community, even as far as women, where there isn't as much support for some of the more marginalized communities. I hate the word marginalized, but I can't think of a better word right now. So forgive me if that, right? There's better words than that. But if you need the help, a great place to start is Psychology Today/US. If you're in the United States, I know I got a lot more viewers now. If you're rocking outside of the United States, still go to Psychology Today. I think they have it available for a lot of major countries. But for the US, US/therapist. It's a place to start. That's all. Some therapists aren't going to be right for you. I am a business coach. I coach entrepreneurs, side hustlers, solopreneurs, people who are grinding it out like yourself, trying to make an impact in the world. But you can't make an impact in the world if your inner world is all jacked up. We see this, not mentioning names, but we see this with founders, with co-founders, with creators who do not have their stability in order. And you see them rocket up to fame. You see them having the shine, all that good stuff, and then they kind of lose it. That's not to judge them. It's I've been on that rocket ship a couple times. It's hard. Whether you have a best-selling book or you got the #1 app in the world, it is hard. I'm not trying to say this stuff is easy. That's why I'm a business coach, to help you on that journey, because I know how hard it is. What I am saying is that if you don't fortify your inner world, then how can you make an impact on anybody else or anything else? How are you going to do that? And once you hit that fame, and on the main channel, again, at youtube.com/BrownDamon, I'm sharing a lot of clips from these cultural icons who lost their way or got into trouble or lost it all and tried to figure it out. That was because they were dealing with so much inner stuff. And then they hit that rocket to fame. And I'm not one to say that if they're ready or not ready. I'm not one to judge them. Some of their successes I cannot relate to because it was on such a magnitude. I am far from an icon. So it was on such a magnitude, I cannot relate to that. What I can say, though, is that for the success that I've had and for those dreams, again, the best-selling books, the #1 apps, the businesses that I've sold, having those dreams come true ended up being the ultimate test of how solid my inner world was. From an ego standpoint, from a relationship standpoint, from people changing based on my success, how I want to navigate that, like all those things come up. So whatever garbage, for lack of a better term, you're not dealing with, if you're watching this channel and you want to have that success, that stuff's going to come up, whether you end up quote unquote failing and you don't make it. I hate those terms, so we'll use those terms. Or if you end up having radical success. As Elizabeth Gilbert said in her beautiful TED Talk, it's worth looking up. Radical failure and radical success feel the same way. It's going to bring up all your garbage. So if you feel as though you need a higher level of support, or with where you're going, more importantly, like I talked about at the top of the show, when I was sharing with a family member, hey, I'm going to get support. It wasn't like I needed support at that second that things were falling apart. I knew where I wanted to go required that extra support. So it wasn't about where I was at, right? When you're working on the book manuscript, you're not thinking of being on a 10-city world tour and being on the cover of a magazine. No. You're trying to get through that manuscript. You're trying to get through that play. You're trying to get that music piece together. But you got to think a little bit further than that. Because if you keep saying, I want to have the #1 movie in America, I want to be the writer behind it, what do you think is going to happen? All that stuff that you're not dealing with, and bless you if you're dealing with some heavy stuff, it's not like that shit goes away. In fact, it gets worse because all these outside expectations come in. And sometimes your outside world and the validation you're getting from the outside doesn't match the level of validation that you're giving yourself. I'm going to keep it real with you. Sometimes that doesn't match. And if it doesn't match, you need that support. Check that out, get some support. There's other hotlines and so forth that are a little bit too numerous to put into the chat today, but be sure Google is your friend. Google, get some help for your particular area. That's why I put a little phone there. It's old school phone from my generation, but trust me, it still works on the smartphones. There's chats, so forth. There's so many ways that you can get support. Get that support now. Particularly, again, if you're on the road that I'm trying to help pay for you, you're going to need the support now or later. But you are going to have to deal with some of that stuff because a lot of those insecurities come up when we actually get to the dream that we want. Wherever you go, there you are. So one of the realest things I've ever heard. Wherever you go, there you are. I'm going to recommend another book that that's one of my favorites. And long-time listeners and viewers of the show are familiar with it. Essentialism. I've had this book for 10 years. I still can't say it. Essentialism by Greg McKeown. Hope you're doing wonderful, Greg. I spoke to him very briefly online. He seemed like a cool guy. Fantastic book. Again, I've been rocking this book for like 10 years. Something like that. I think it was shortly after my first son was born. He's about to turn 10. So about 10 years. Fantastic book. It looks thick, but it's not that thick. It's like big letters in, and there's pictures and stuff. Like what I'm trying to say is that you can read it quickly. If you're an avid reader like myself, you can go through it. What I love about this book is that it talks about how to strip things down to your essential things. So we talk about minimalism, which you can't tell, but I don't have that much stuff. I don't own that much stuff. That's one thing. Minimalism, that's hot. Cool. A lot of hipsters do it. I might be a hipster, whatever. Essentialism, though, is more taking that minimalist idea as far as things and applying it to those things that are invisible, applying to those things that are less tangible. And the beauty of this is that once you strip it down, then you don't have to sweat stuff. And I think that's such an important part of it. I'll give you a really simple example. And for some reason, my kids are on my mind today. With me doing this program, I'm going to end the program in about 10 minutes because I have to go take care of my kids. So everything starts with that. Okay, I'm going to go and do this show. Thank you, all of y'all. Like the amount of people that are watching the show has multiplied in recent days. So thank you so much for the love. I love y'all, but not as much as I love my kids. I got to make sure they're straight. And so the amount of folks that are watching this show could 10x, 20x, 30x. I'm still rocking with my kids. They are my priority. As mentioned earlier, they are my rock. And so if they're one of my big rocks, everything else falls behind that. And so I would love to have a 3-hour-long show. It ain't going to happen right now, though, because my kids need me. And my kids are their priority. Essentialism gives the roadmap to be able to do that. And I think that's such an important thing to figure out what's important to you. Again, since I keep bringing up the rocks, how to organize your life right now, it's worth checking out. And I'm actually reminding myself that I actually have about 10 minutes because you guys got me on a rant today because it's really good questions. So I appreciate it. Excuse me. And yes, absolutely, it comes down to doing the work. One random thing, if you were like myself and you want to take a few minutes to get yourself centered today, I don't know, you have a 60 and a 80-pound kid trying to jump on your neck and do WWF, as we used to call it back in the day, or WWE as the kids call it. And you need a minute to kind of get your composure back together because you're not a spring chicken anymore. Daily meditation works really well for me. That's doing the walks and then literally meditating for like 5 minutes. And in fact, there's one I would recommend if you want to rock with it. This is well worn. And thank you, Mom, for getting it for me. Got it for me many, many years ago. I still got it. It is well worn. Basically what it is, it's a mat. It's simple. It's plush. And what I will do sometimes, if you guys are familiar with my work, I'm an avid napper. I took a nap earlier today. I rock with the naps. People ask, how do you do 8 books in 6 years? I nap. That's how I do it. Listen, this is a nice little place to nap. Now I'm, you know, now I'm 5.5 feet tall, so it's not like I'm really small, but it's one of those things where it works really well for laying. And my office isn't quite big enough for a couch, or if I had a couch, it would feel claustrophobic. But this little thing goes right in the corner, and so you can lay on it. My kids, particularly when they were younger, they're getting a little bit too big now, so they'll fall off the side. But when they're younger, they've fallen asleep on this thing. It is cozy, it is comfortable, it is firm. But if you're like myself and you start meditating a little bit, and I literally will meditate just 5 minutes a day. Been doing that for almost 20 years. Yeah, it's been about 17 years since I started doing that. 2000, oh my gosh, it's been 20 years. I started in 2004. That is insane. Time flies. So it'll be 20 years next week or next year. This is a really simple way to do it. Now, if your money's tight or you're like, I don't know if I want to meditate or whatever, that's cool too. There's just a recommendation. Because what you can do, as I did, I started meditating when I lived in New Orleans, going back to New Orleans. Again, shout out to Mardi Gras. Is I would just meditate on the floor in a lotus position, which when your legs are crossed, and rocking with that. Right? Right. Isn't it beautiful? Just doing that. And the nice thing about it is that, again, it's back to the smallest unit of joy, which again is, you can check the links below or in the show notes, where you don't have to do this complex thing. Right? Now, my mom got me the mat, but if she didn't get me the mat, I'd still be meditating regularly. You understand what I'm saying? So it's not necessarily about the thing. You don't need the thing. I don't usually have that issue, but some of the people that I coach and some of the people that I've met, depending on our mindset, we have that issue sometimes where it's like, all right, because I used to jog every morning. So it's like, all right, well, if I'm going to jog, then I need the right running shoes. And then I need the right outfit, the right shorts, or, I need the right protection, particularly if you're a woman, it's like, I need the right bra for it. And I need this and that. And there are certain things that you need. Yeah, sure. But at a certain point, it's like, how much more do you need before you actually start? And that's one of the things that I espouse a lot in my books, including Career Remix, and that I talk a lot about as a coach, and even on this show, is you can start right now. And a lot of the things that we feel like we need to start, we need to have to start. It's really the resistance. Shout out to Stephen Pressfield, or it's the ratchet. Shout out to Seth Godin. Like, I can, all of us have names for it. It's that, I'm gonna be blunt about it. It's that bullshit that stops you from starting. That's what it is. Inertia, the ratchet, resistance, whatever. You haven't started yet. You got to start at a certain point. That is part of mental health, because sometimes we put so many mental barriers. I can't even get it out. We put so many mental barriers on our mind that we're actually not moving forward. And it's like, wow, is that what we're going to do? We're just going to sit here until we get the perfect shoe. We're going to sit here until we get the perfect Apple Watch so we can watch our time. Oh, I don't want to start yet. Nah, start today. Start today. This is part of that. So I have a slight amount of guilt with recommending a meditation mat, because, if you meditate for a little while, and I'd already been meditating for quite a few years when my mom got me that mat, then it was perfect. I'd already been in the habit. But if you feel like you need to get this mat and then you'll start, that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. A couple other recommendations. 2 apps that I would recommend, and one is called Calm, and the other one is called Headspace. The links are right there. These are linked towards Apple, because I know the Apple stuff. I'm pretty sure they're available on Android too. So sorry for the Android users, but just look them up and you can find them. But the links are right there for fellow Apple users. These work because you can take them with you. I had already been meditating for several years by the time Calm, and I think Headspace is a little bit later, but correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. I think Calm came first. At least I heard about Calm first. I'll put it like that. I'd already been meditating for almost 20 years. And so, by the time the smartphone revolution happened, and when I started meditating, smartphones weren't even around like that. The iPhone wasn't even out. And so I was already in that space. But I can speak for Calm in particular. We've used it with our kids. My wife has used it. I've used it occasionally, but again, I got my own practice. So I don't. It doesn't quite work as well with me. But there's storytelling, which works again really well with the kids. A lot of famous actors have done it too, and of course, I'm blanking. I think Idris Elba did one a year or two ago. But famous actors who are known for their richness and their voice. Again, Idris Elba has a fantastic voice, like lulling you to sleep, that kind of vibe, or calming you down, dealing with anxiety. I know with a couple of the credit cards that I have, American Express comes to mind. I know with American Express, they had a deal where if you had an Amex card, which is what they call it, then you could actually get a year of Calm for free, which is actually how I got into Calm and got it for my family. So they had a deal with that. I don't know if they still have the deal, but feel free to check it out for the credit cards that you own. Headspace, very similar. I'm not as familiar with Headspace. I've never used it, but I've heard it recommended a lot. The thing is, and let's go down the line before we wrap up. Like, of course, I'm getting lost in my own notes here. So if you want therapy help, connecting with someone in person if possible, or over the phone, here you go. You got that. You got that support. If you want to have a little bit more of a digital or multimedia experience, and you just need kind of a companion along the way, Calm and Headspace, both extremely popular. Again, I can vouch directly for Calm, and it's worked wonders with our family. If you want to figure out your own practice, even if you don't meditate per se, but just you want to sit down somewhere, again, this is the mat that I rock with. Again, thanks again, Mom. It's fantastic. It works for me. So you can tell it's well worn. It's a decade or so old now. Or you can go ahead and set up a little corner in your area. Again, like all the meditation, all the stuff I do is in my relatively tiny office. My office is around the size of some of the apartments I've lived in. Shout out to San Francisco. You know what I'm talking about. Tiny place, but you're able to make space for that. And lastly, there are books that will help you along the way. Thich Nhat Hanh's No Mud, No Lotus. Again, has been a constant companion for a couple decades now. Shout out to my wife, because that's how I discovered this book. And Essentialism by Greg McKeown. Really, really important part of it. And if you're worried about career stuff, Career Remix is an option as well for you to learn about if it's your career that's affecting your mental health, giving you anxiety, those things that are, as one therapist said, situational things, right? So it's not an internal thing or imbalance, but more like you're in this situation and it's hard and it happens to be career related. I recommend my book, Career Remix, to help you on your way and figure out how you can, work out a better situation. As I say, the job is theirs, but the career is ours. In other words, what you do with your career is up to you. No one can take that away. No one can take away things you've learned or your toolboxes. So thanks for joining the live Q&A with Improving Inner Peace. The Bring Your Worth show is every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 1:11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time. Click the link below. You can subscribe for free. Thank you for all the new folks that are coming through. Lots of y'all coming through from all over the world. Much love. Again, we're about 300 episodes in, and I appreciate all that shine and all the ways that we can connect and hopefully get better together. Yeah. Well, until next time, remember to bring your worth that you can always build from now. Take care.